Rachel and I are hopping on a phone call tomorrow to start like more of the home design process. So we're getting into the exciting point, but it's also becoming more real and scarier.
Right. Yeah. For me, it was sort of towards the end of design. We had the plans pretty much drawn up. We're waiting on the 100% CDs to come back to us. And I was like, oh man, we actually have to like build this thing now.
Yeah, there's no turning back. Hey.
What's up, dude?
How's it going?
Oh, another day in paradise.
Dude, this is pro. I feel like both of our audio's working, both of our videos working. I'm only 2 minutes late.
Yeah, we just don't talk about it and everything will keep going.
I feel like this is, we've done this before.
Maybe.
How's it going on your end?
Good, man. Running around like crazy today at work. It seems like one of those days where just everything's going in the wrong direction for us, but we'll get there. Yeah.
Like what?
Just people problems, hardware problems, all that sort of stuff.
I guess that's what happened. So I was looking up. First off, I don't know what email I had on file for you, but I guess it worked.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, I'm normally not the one sending out links, and then I was like, oh shit, I never sent or even discussed any sort of link for him for the podcast. And then I was like, all right, so then I have to figure out how to do this. But it worked, and nobody would know otherwise unless I just said something. But I was looking up you today, and I found that they did like an article on you for work. That's pretty sweet.
Oh,
I assume you know about that.
Yeah. It was last month, I guess, May timeframe. Yeah,
that's legit.
A little write up.
How'd that come about?
Not really sure, to be honest. I know I've been trying to inject myself more into the like public facing front of what we do here.
Yeah.
And so I think they just, anytime our communications office finds some fresh blood in the water, they'll latch on and try to get as much info out of us, as much outreach out of us as I can. So I think that was just their way of sort of putting me out there a little bit.
Sweet. So I also looked up, there's something I want to touch on with that article that was pretty cool. But I also, I was looking up the last time we had you on, and I think this always happens, but that was 2 years ago in July, which is
that's wild.
Crazy to me. I was like, oh yeah, that must have been last year. And this always happens. It doesn't ever seem like it's that long ago, but looking it up, it was, for anyone who does not or has not listened to the the last episode, it was July of 2022, and episode 222 is the last time. It was the main podcast that we had Brio on. So for the people who have not listened to that, go listen to it. Maybe prior to this, it might not matter. But for anyone who is not familiar with who you are, just give me like a brief background to who you are, what you do, where you're from.
Yeah, so I'm obviously Brio Bourgeois is my name. I live on the South Coast, so down on the Gulf Coast in Mississippi. And basically what I do for a living is I'm a mechanical operations engineer running test stands that test rocket engines. So I have an engineering background. I have an undergrad degree and a master's degree in mechanical engineering. So it gives a little bit of background of my sort of mindset and how I look at things. But yeah, just wanted to get back with you. I know last time we talked, we hadn't started building our house yet.
Yep.
And a lot of what went into our house was I got a lot of information from y'all's podcasts over the years prior to that. So just thought it'd be cool to hop on with you and chat about that whole process. But
yeah, for sure. So one of the things, before I get into that, one of the things in this article, well, I tried to read that article, and it's like most of it was way over my head where I'm like, I don't even understand what the hell they're saying right now. But I did understand that it said essentially you put in an application to become an astronaut. Is that like accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. So about every 4 years or so, they'll put out a job announcement for an astronaut candidate class. So basically, the way they hire astronauts is they put out an announcement, and there'll be a astronaut candidate class. So just because you get accepted to that, you're not automatically an astronaut. Even if you make it through that training program after being accepted to it, it doesn't even mean that you're going to go into space or anything. But yeah, so every 4 years they put out an announcement looking for astronaut candidates. I applied the previous announcement, and then I just applied to this past one. It was open a couple weeks in April. They had it open, so got all my application and everything put in for that. But yeah, so we'll see. I
That
don't.
that's so crazy, especially considering that I was like, I didn't realize that's how this worked. I just thought that, and maybe this is the case, but it's like you just want to become an astronaut, and there's like a very direct um course that you take to become an astronaut. I mean, I guess it makes way more sense that somebody with your background can then transition into that. But is that like the standard for how you become an astronaut? I always thought it was just like you had a childhood dream to become an astronaut, and then you just became one.
Yeah, no, that's the crazy thing is there is no standard set path to be accepted to that astronaut candidacy. I mean, people range from there's a lot of military pilots
Yeah,
that go through and are selected, but anything from medical doctors, teachers, engineers, uh, geologists, I mean, all sorts of scientists. Obviously, everybody's sort of in that either astronaut or aerospace, like pilot track, or like a STEM related field of study. So um, I think it may be a requirement to have a master's in a STEM related field. So
yeah,
math, sciences, engineering, that sort of stuff, or the pilot route.
that's absolutely insane to me. I would assume that you've had the conversation with your wife that you want to at
Yeah.
some point or would like to go into space, but like, what's that like? I feel like
Uh,
my wife would be like, no, absolutely not. Like, you're not even leaving for the weekend, let alone going into space.
yeah, there's definitely some uh, apprehensiveness to me putting in the application, but she's always been super supportive. She's known pretty much since I started working here that that was an aspiration of mine. Um, Lucky for her, the odds are very low. So this uh, application, they had over 8,000 applicants, and they'll accept anywhere from 8 to 10
Yeah,
for the class. So there's like a 0.1% chance of being selected. So that's sort of what I rest on. Try to make her feel better that
yeah.
it's just a very low likelihood, but
That's cool though.
we'll see.
So yeah, you last time we had spoke, you had yet to start building your house. I would assume at this point that you are in the house and settling into the house and understand what you like about the house, what you might not like about the house, and all that stuff. So my first question for you would be, why did you guys decide to build rather than just buy a house?
Yeah, so we actually found this piece of property. One of my wife's coworkers, they bought the piece of property next to ours, and we'd just been toying around with the idea of buying a bigger piece of property. We owned a house, but it was just on a little postage stamp lot in town,
Hmm.
and I've always wanted to have more property, more area to spread out and have gardens and ride dirt bikes and four wheelers and get let my kids get into trouble that
Yeah,
way as opposed to getting in trouble on the streets. Um, and so my coworker or my wife's coworker, they bought the piece of property that ended up being next to the one we bought, and they knew we were sort of looking at property. They invited us out there, and where our property is, there's some access to a river, so they sort of took us through all the trails, all that sort of stuff, and we just fell in love with the area, fell in love with the property. We actually bought it back in 2018, and just sort of sat on it until here recently. I guess we started the build in, let's see, it would have been started breaking ground October, November of 22.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then, like, shortly after we had spoken to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't long.
And
Um,
how much property do you guys own?
15 acres.
Okay. Yeah, I was watching some of your YouTube videos, and I guess I knew you had that much property, but I was like, "Yeah, this is really sick."
Yeah, we enjoy it a lot. It's mostly wooded with some trails through it, and a lot of it's actually down in a river bottom, so it's not really usable land for building or anything. But I think we got just enough grass to where I actually enjoy cutting it and don't loathe having to cut it all. So
Yeah, that's, like, the goal with our property as well. It's 6 acres, which for around here is still a decent amount. A lot of it can't be built on, but I'm like, right now we have 3 acres and so much of it is grass, and I'm like, I just don't want this pristine lawn that I have to continue to maintain. Like,
right.
I'm fine with cutting the lawn, but I'm tired of, like, just putting chemicals on the lawn so
Hmm.
that our customers can, or our, like, everyone who drives by can see that we have a nice lawn out front, and I'm like, I want some pasture. I want, like, a small area of manageable lawn, and then the rest of it can just be wild.
Right, right. And that's sort of what we want to do eventually with the cleared area at our house. Like have a nice little lawn right around the house, kids can play on that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
But I really want to get. So we have a bad. I don't know if y'all have a problem with invasives up there, but we have a bad problem with Kogan grass down here, and like most of our yard is Kogan grass. So the only way to get rid of it's like to completely nuke it with chemicals, burn it all down basically, and then start fresh and all that sort of stuff. I want to do like native wildflowers and native grasses and stuff like that, but it's definitely a long term project.
so what is, I'm not familiar with Kogan grass, but what is, the issue with it? It's killing everything else?
Yeah, so it's highly invasive. It takes over everything. You can't get rid of it unless you use some pretty uh, powerful chemicals,
Yeah,
and it just take like there's nothing for pollinators in it. It's just even I think it's actually toxic to cows as well. So like my neighbor has cows on their property, and just trying to keep from whenever I'm cutting grass, I got to be conscious not to shoot it all into their pasture where it's going to seed and
yeah.
end up hurting them and stuff like that. Just
So did you say that you found, other than obviously nuking it, like, what is the, solution for it?
as far as I know, that's it.
Yeah. So we
My
we have we have something called Japanese stilt grass, which is very similar, and it's like, I don't think it has, like, it's not harmful to other animals, but it essentially just takes over the forest bottom and kills out, like, just completely suffocates anything else. And it's in it starts in the woods because nobody's back there, nobody's keeping it at bay, and then it ends up creeping into everything. And, like, it's super pretty this
mhm,
time of year, but, like, once it dies, it's basically just this, like, nasty brown grass that's all tangled up with itself. And that's something that I looked into. It's like, I would love to have some, like, ferns and stuff back there that are more native to our area. Um, but I don't know how to keep that stuff at bay.
right. Yeah, it's tough, man. All these invasive species that people put in thinking they're going to be decorative and awesome, just it's bad business.
Yeah. It is pretty, and, like, even when we first started looking at it, it's in a lot of areas around here where it's wet. And I was like, it is so pretty, but then when I found out it's an invasive species basically killing everything else, I'm like, damn it, this shit is everywhere. Everywhere you look now, it's like, yep, there it is again. There it is
Hmm.
again. Um, so it's been 2 years, I guess, since you started the build. How long have you been in the house?
Yeah, so the build itself took about 13 months, 13 and a half, 14 months. So we've been in since I guess the early part of December.
Okay.
So 6, 7 months or so.
And how big is the house?
So it's 3,050 heated and cooled.
Okay. And is that when you first started the design process of the house, is that where you felt that you would be?
So we just sort of ended up there. In our little neighborhood, we have to have a minimum of 2,700, and sort of we basically did the first floor layout how we want the house built, how we wanted to live in it. and stuff like that. And then basically we were a little under that 2,700, and we had to add basically a second story bonus room and guest room to get up to that 27
Okay.
minimum. And it just, the way it fell out, it ended up being a little bit over.
So you were looking to be a little bit smaller than you anticipated in the first place.
Yeah.
That's what we're like in the same boat. Our house now is around 2,700. It's an old house, so it's just different. A lot of the spaces are chopped up and not as usable. Um, but we just like we don't want to overbuild something.
Right.
So the like we're trying to balance, and one of the questions I had for you is like, how do you balance your needs for a house right now, like your financial capacity for affording to build a house, with where you are now, basically considering that you intend to be there for a long time and the family's going to grow and your financial capacity will more than likely grow, and it's like, how far do you stretch yourself while getting the things that you want and not having a ton of regrets, like we should have put an extra room on, we should have done this when we had the opportunity. Like what played into those decisions?
Yeah. So right now we got 2 kids, and that's where we're staying. Got situations situated to where that's where we're going to be. Um, so we knew we wanted each of them to have, and we have one boy, one girl. So we wanted to make sure each of them had their own bedroom. And since they were different genders, we went ahead and did separate bathrooms. Um, Before we found out our second was going to be a boy, we toyed with the idea of doing like a Jack and Jill bathroom between
Yeah,
the 2 kids' bedrooms, but that sort of decision made itself for us. And then just a lot of the stuff that I've gotten from y'all's podcast over the years, and really thinking further ahead than I thought I needed to think. Like, I'm thinking all the way down to retiring and not being able to walk around, needing a wheelchair or a walker to get around the house.
yeah,
Thinking about that sort of stuff, like, I wasn't in that future thought mindset 3-4 years ago. Um, but just as we started going through things, I thought, oh, well, you know what we should do? We should do curbless showers, because one day it's going to be nice to just wheel on in there if I need to, or if somebody needs to. You never know what's going to happen. Even if it's not in old age, you can get in a car wreck on the way home tonight and end up in a wheelchair. Um, so just trying to think about those different scenarios. Obviously, you can't plan and build for every scenario,
sure,
but I think there's ways you can go about designing a house, and that's one thing our builder was really helpful with. Um, so we used a design build firm for our build. I didn't contract it out myself, um, but going through the design with them was helpful, because obviously this is the first house me and my family have built. We don't know all these options, all the scenarios, all that sort of stuff, and there's a lot of design input we got through that process that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Um, and so we really relied on them a lot to help us work out those different options and look at the cost benefit to different stuff like that.
so when you contacted your builder, did you guys have an idea of what you like, an idea of a style that you wanted to build and a number that you wanted to spend?
Yeah, we did. So we had an idea of, not, I mean, kind of had the style in mind. The style changed from what I had in mind to where we ended up, just a little bit. I think I was leaning more towards the farmhousey style, and through design, we sort of moved more towards a. Yeah, I really don't know what the actual style of it is, but a little bit more modern. Not like NS Builders modern,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
not not the typical HGTV farmhouse looking deal. So
Sure.
it's a lot more cut up than I had imagined. So different offsets and stuff like that. But we had an idea of what we wanted as far as rooms and sort of layout, between where our room is, the kitchen area, the kids' room, stuff like that. And then we had a number in mind, and going back to what you were saying earlier about how you to know how far you stretch yourself now versus where you might be financially in the future. I mean, I'll go ahead and be honest with you. We definitely we stretched it as much as we could right now. So,
Yeah.
but I think it's one of those things where it's going to pay off in the future.
Yeah. And that's like what I'm it's the same conversation you've had with so many people who are older than you or are just more life experienced than you. I know Nick had the conversation with his dad. I've had the conversation with my dad and his wife when we went to buy the land in the first place, where it's like you just make it work, and you figure it out and things fall into place and you continue to line up one thing after another. And to this point, like there's times where I felt that I'm not going to make it work. And then there's times where I feel like I am going to make it work. And I'm at the point now where I'm like, we have to make this work for multiple reasons. Um, but then it's like, okay, so we're gonna make this work. We're gonna make this leap. And there's like a million reasons why not to from a financial perspective, but there's also a million reasons that we should from like a personal perspective, an emotional perspective, what we want for our kids and our life and everything else. And like there's potential to make money there as well, but I don't think that that's a driving factor for me. Again, but once you're like, yeah, let's do this, then it's like, all right, well, let's do this by spending as little as possible while we're doing it. And I'm like at that point now where I don't want to look back at this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and be like, well, I wish we would have just spent an extra $100,000, $200,000, because in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that much. But right now, with everything that's going on, those like the numbers do impact you so much greater than 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Anything that I've ever done in my life where I've gone and I've stretched myself or I've reached for the thing that I felt was unattainable, I have not regretted. And I don't want to do that. But this is just one of those big decisions in life where it's scary. And I'm like, I don't want to stretch ourselves too thin
Right.
because I don't want the financial weight of what we're doing to affect how I feel from like a stress perspective, because then it's counterintuitive for all the reasons that we're doing this in the first place. We're doing this to create like a life and privacy in a home that we can feel we can be ourselves in. But then if it's going to put so much weight on us financially, it's completely counterintuitive to what we're trying to do in the first place.
No, yeah, I'm same exact boat. Um, so yeah, you don't want to get to a point where you resent your house because of how much it costs you. And obviously, there's opportunity cost to not building a house like we did. I mean, one of the big things, and you just mentioned it, is the life that we wanted to have for our kids, and just having that to where we can just open the door and say, go run outside or whatever it is, as
Yeah.
opposed to where we were previously, where we had a real small fenced in backyard and you could throw a tennis ball to the other side, and that would be your childhood at that point, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
And how far is that from where you are now?
it's only about 20 minutes or so.
Okay. Yeah, so
It's
it's
not
still the
real
same
far.
area.
Yeah, yeah, for
Did your
sure.
kids have to switch school?
No, so they weren't in school until after we got the house
Okay.
built.
Nice.
So there really wasn't any school switching. We actually have them in a school in the same town where our old house was. So we just I say we. My wife does all that.
Yeah.
She's a rock star. I couldn't do what I do without her, but she takes care of getting the kids to and from school all the time.
Nice. And you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys you had sold where you were before and were renting?
Yeah, so luckily we got to sell our house in the peak COVID craziness of the real estate market down here. So that was a huge benefit. That let us get the actual property completely paid off before we even started building. So went into the build basically with a fair amount of equity just in the land.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we were able to rent a house that was 20 minutes the other side of where we're at now, um, for the build process. So it worked
So
out well for us.
at the point that you guys started building, you outright owned the land. Did you still have remaining equity from selling your old house?
Yeah, so we had enough from selling the house to get the land paid off, as well as basically got all the design work paid for at that
Yeah.
point.
Yep. And then what type of loan did you guys secure for the construction?
So just a standard one-time close and construction loan.
And so you were paying interest throughout the course of the build?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
so only interest during the build.
Nice. Because we're looking into all that at this point, and it's the same type of situation where the market is still great, and I don't see it like within the next 1 to 2 years. Nothing's really going to happen. The interest rates are still so high
Right.
that like people can't afford to move, so the supply of houses on the market is not great. There's not a lot of houses like what we have in our area, so our house will sell and we'll have a fair amount of equity in the house at that point, just from when we bought it to what it's worth now. So it'll be the same thing as moving that equity over to pay off loans,
Right.
and then still have some equity left for the build at that point, because right now all of the design is just being paid for out of pocket, um, not based on pulling anything out. So I've just been generating income that's additional to like our normal household income, where it's like, all right, we'll continue to pay for the design
Right.
as we move throughout this process. So in a perfect world, we'll be able to sell and then pay everything down and have a smaller mortgage than we would. But the difficult part is like while we're doing that, still having the mortgage, what type of construction loan do we get? Where it's like now we're not stretching ourselves with two mortgages while we're trying to build the house. And at that point, the decisions are even tighter where it's like, yeah, we don't have any money to spend right now. We don't want to
Right.
spend any money. Um, so we're just navigating that entire process right now as far as what we do. I would love to be able to sell our house beforehand, but even like at this point with my business, where we are, what I want, like there's not in our area, there's not a huge rental market for what we would need.
Right.
And I would need to move my shop, I would need to move all my stuff, and it's almost an impossibility. Um, so it does make the most amount of sense for us to stay put. That being said, I don't think we'll lose too much as far as the market goes in the next 1 to 2 years. Like it's not going to
Right.
turn. Nothing's going to happen that quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So
that's good.
I think we'll still have that equity there. um, so we basically where we stand now is we had the property 6 acres, and if you're looking at it like above from a map, um, our lot where our current lot is, if you go one lot to the left, there's a 6 acre lot where our neighbors live that our kids are really good friends with. Our next door neighbors that we've been friends with since we moved here. And then one lot over from that is the 6 acre lot that we bought. So it's
Gotcha.
literally like hopping over our neighbors to the new lot. It's essentially the same size as theirs. It's a rectangle. Um, and then to the left of that lot is a pie shaped lot, which is widest at the street. And then it goes back to a point, and that's another 5 or 6 acre lot, and that's all pond. So it could never be
Mm,
built on. And
nice.
then one more lot to the left is actually who we bought the property from, which is like 10 acres. And that obviously can't be built anymore. That's actually in a different town.
Hmm.
So like we have the last buildable lot on the town line, because the pond lot is actually the last lot on the town line, but you can't build there. And then behind us is like another 60 acres essentially of like wooded wetlands. So the front of our lot, if it's 6 acres, the front of it, the front two is essentially buildable, and the back four is all this deciduous wetlands. So we had to basically get a waiver for the wetlands. So we had to get an ecologist out, delineate where the wetlands were, do a test for septic, and then at that point, we had to submit everything to the DEP for them to say, okay, yeah, the wetlands buffer only has to be 50 feet rather than like 300, which is
Mm,
typical, which would have made the lot undevelopable. But the ecologist was like, yeah, you'll be able to get a 50-foot waiver here. So we literally last week finally heard back from the DP after almost a full year, which was supposed to
Jeez.
take 3 months, that they are approving the wetlands waiver of 50 feet. So we now, which we had an idea what the limit of disturbance would be, but we now finally have like an area that we can put the house.
Gotcha.
Um, so now I'm like, to be completely honest, I like, we're into it 35 grand as far as approvals and engineering and all this stuff at this point. And I could have continued to move forward, and like I pretty much had gotten the green light from the ecologist as far as the waivers go, but I'm like, I'm just not putting any more money into this
Right.
to get a grading plan and everything else until I'm like 100% certain, because we bought the property and then we put a bunch more cash into it, and I'm like, I can't do it. Like I can't do it anymore until we get this approval. So we finally just got approvals. We actually got some good news as far as where the driveway can be, which we thought we were going to have to move the existing driveway over because it would be within the wetlands buffer, but that's not the case. So we got some good news there, and we're finally at the point where it's like now we can finalize house design, get a grading plan done, get through the zoning and all that stuff, and then submit for building permits.
Nice. Yeah, that's
Um,
crazy. You got to go through all that stuff, and I get the wetland stuff. We got a lot of wetlands down here on the coast as well, but that's crazy that it took a year to get that approval.
yeah, and like we were on top and they just dragged their feet and they told me that they would. Like where our area is, like it's basically our one street is rural for where we live, but not everything else is. And they told us like it's going to be tough to get out there during the winter months, and the access is literally off like a main road that goes
Right.
through multiple towns. um so yeah, that was a huge weight off of our shoulders, and we're obviously pretty excited to have that and start like really figuring out where we want to put the house on the property and finalizing like a layout, a massing for the
Mhm.
property. And then we're actually, Rachel and I are hopping on a phone call tomorrow to start like more of the home design process. um
Awesome.
yeah, so we're getting into the exciting point, but it's also like becoming more real and
Right.
scarier.
Yeah. No, I remember getting to that point sorta. For me, it was sort of towards the end of design. We had all the plans pretty much drawn up. We're waiting on the 100% CDs to come back to us, and I was like, oh man, we actually have to like build this thing now.
Yeah, there's no turning back.
And like for me, I say that like it was a big deal for me, but I didn't do any of the actual building contracting wise. I did do some work on the house, like I put the floor in and fabricated all the handrails and stuff for the stairs. But yeah, there's definitely that moment when it's like, oh, this is real life now.
Yeah. So now that you're in the house, are there things, or are you willing to admit that there's things that you should have done differently?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, uh, like I said, it's the first house we built, and I knew we weren't going to hit everything perfectly the first time. Um, I think if we had to do it over again, I'd make our bedrooms a little bit bigger and try to eliminate the extra second story space,
Yeah.
just to reduce complexity. And uh, we don't really use that space at all right now.
Mhm.
My wife has a little office set up there right now, and we hadn't even furnished the guest bed that's up there yet. So like it's more or less unused space right now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, going back to what we were talking about, like future plans and stuff like that, I'm sure at some point we'll get it set up and kids will have friends over and do sleepovers and all that sort of stuff. But face value right now, that's something that I would probably do a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you guys have a basement?
no, no. So we're
Crawl space?
slab on grade.
A slab on grade, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we won't have a basement, just because water table in our area is really high.
same.
So I'll probably do crawl space, just a place to put like utilities. I might
Hmm.
have some storage. And then I like the idea of not having our utilities buried, where they're not accessible. But then, and like realistically, there's not a ton of slab on grade construction around here until you get into like big
Gotcha.
developments. Um, but I don't think I want like a second floor, and I understand the cost associated with you're gonna have single floor living, more foundation, more wall framing, like from a linear foot and all that stuff. But I'm I'm leaning more towards, people call it ranch, but like not
Hmm.
necessarily a ranch style home, but single floor living. We did our first house was a bungalow, so a completely different layout and style of home, but there is something to be said for not having a second floor and like simplifying the build and efficiency, a heating and cooling perspective and everything else. Like we're in an old house now, but just managing the conditioning of the house with two
Hmm.
floors is such a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, like, the only reason I've been going upstairs lately is checking, making sure humidity's good up there and
Yeah,
all that
it's
sort of
not
stuff.
500 degrees up
You're
there.
right, right, and we that was sort of one of the things I just being an engineer, I got into the weeds on, throughout the planning process and the build itself, was the air conditioned systems and how we were gonna plan all that and keep everything working together, um, and it works well, so far, um, but, yeah, it was definitely one of those things that I was nervous about having the upstairs. It's a whole 'nother unit to maintenance, filter to
Correct.
keep clean, condensate lines to make sure they're not getting clogged up, and
Yep.
all that sort of stuff. So
So
definitely something to think about.
was your initial design single floor living until you found out, or was it like so early on that you realized you were going to have to add a second floor that you didn't really ever move forward with any sort of like single floor design?
I think initially we had, instead of it being two, like a, currently it's a more or less a bonus room and then a bedroom with full bath.
Yeah.
And I think originally it was going to be more of like a loft space. At least that's what I had in my mind. My wife may completely disagree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think she necessarily wanted a loft space or anything, but I always saw us having sort of like a bonus room or like a game room, something like that in
Yeah.
addition. But yeah, we didn't initially plan on having the extra bedroom up there.
And you guys have an attached or detached garage?
It's attached.
Yeah. I
And
think, well,
that was
go
one of
ahead.
the things that we sort of ended up stretching on a little bit more is I wanted to have a nice big garage, basically because I knew at some point we'll build a shop on the property, but it's gonna be well on down the road to build the
Yeah.
shop that I wanna build because I want a big, nice shop.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so what we ended up doing, I think the garage ended up being like 29 by 29. Obviously, way bigger than you need for vehicles, but so, like, I have my whole workout set up, like squat rack and all that on one side.
Yeah.
My wife parks her car on the other, and then in front of her car, I have an area set up for, I haven't built the workbench yet, I just have a folding table there, but we got enough space for me to do anything I need to do there. I have some shop space at my dad's house, basically a barn where I have all my fabrication equipment set up. Um, so if I need to do anything major, I just go there and do big projects there. But the garage we have now is big enough for me to do sort of anything I need to do around the house, lawnmower maintenance, all that sort of stuff. But
Yeah, I think what we're looking at doing is not having an attached garage. Like we know that we want a standalone building as is,
mhm,
and making the standalone building large enough that it can suit my needs. And if we need to get my wife's car in there, and then having some lean-tos to be able to store some equipment underneath of it,
mhm,
um, and kind of using that as like, I feel if we weren't going to have that, we would want so much extra space in the house just for shit. And
right,
it's like, why are we paying a premium for like square footage conditioned space to keep like garbage or decorations or crap that we use like once a year? And we're like, oh, let's build a bigger house that we can put our stuff for Christmas and like old kids clothes, and like all that stuff right now lives in our unconditioned attic, or it's like
right,
down in the basement. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to build a house for our garbage. Like that doesn't really make that much sense to me. So we're like,
right,
all right, let's use the shop as a catch-all for stuff that like we don't necessarily need in the house. And I also want to be able to build a house that like doesn't consume me not only just building it, but like while we're living there. I don't want a house that we have to pay a ton of money to clean all the time, or constant maintenance, constant upkeep, or just areas of the house just collecting crap,
Right.
which I feel like the bigger you have, the more shit you have. Like if you don't have the space for it, you still make do, but it just doesn't allow you to get more crap.
Yeah, I think that's part of society these days. Unfortunately, is that everything's so consumer driven. Uh, I mean, the economy, everything is based on people buying crap they don't need,
Yeah.
and the more space you have, the more you're just going to buy crap to fill it up. Um, and we're trying to be very conscious uh, with that and try to make sure we're slowly furnishing the house. Like we didn't just go out and buy a bunch of furniture to fill the space. I think the only thing we really bought so far is a bed and a couch. So
Yeah.
we're still very sparsely furnished, but it's just something we're trying to keep conscious of as we're going through it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I forget who I was speaking to. Maybe it's at the coalition summit. They said that they built this house for someone, and then they completely outfitted it so that everything made sense in the house, from like the design of the house, the new house, the furniture, the artwork, everything. And we're not in the tax bracket that allows us or affords us to be able to do that. There's going to be things that we pull over from our old house,
Mhm.
but we do also, like you said, want to use it as an opportunity to like curate the new house the way that
Right.
we want, and not just have like the shell of a new house with all of our old shit.
Right. And that was a big focus point for us too. Is like we didn't want to end up with suffocating in the junk that we had accumulated previously.
Yeah,
And I mean, we're more conscious of it now than we were previously, but it's definitely something you got to stay on top of and make sure you're not just buying things just to fill a space and stuff like that. And my wife's actually really good at not just going crazy and buying a bunch of stuff to fill the spaces she's doing. I'm sort of
yeah,
leaving most of the interior stuff to her to curate, and she's doing a really good job with that.
yeah. I feel like it. It's almost like you're living in an apartment when you're younger, where it's like I'm just gonna bring all my shit from apartment to apartment. It's like
Right.
we built this brand new house, and now it's like your house is new, but it's the same stuff inside, just in different locations. It's like, why do we spend all this money on a new house to just have like the same stuff? And obviously, there we have some heritage pieces and antiques and stuff that we've had over the years, but so much of our stuff is stuff that we just acquired, or Rachel developed with from work, and it had some sort of a flaw, or they wanted her to test its durability. Like a
Mhm.
bunch of my kids' furniture is just stuff from her old work that we've gotten. It's like, all right, we're going to use this as an opportunity to reinvest in a bunch of stuff and really create like a new home, with a lot of new things in it. So yeah, we're excited. It's definitely scary, and I know we'll get through it, but I was excited to talk to you to try and like figure out, or like at least talk to somebody and be like, yeah, we got through this too. Like it's fine to speak with people who build homes for others throughout, that's what they do for a living, and customers who have a ton of money to be able to afford whatever they want and build whatever house they want. But it's not often to be able to speak to just like a normal person who's building a house for their family, who has a budget and can't build a massive house and doesn't want to build a massive house and everything else. And I knew that I would be able to get a little bit of insight from you as far as what you guys did and what worked for you and what has not worked for you and possibly what you do differently.
Yeah, for sure. Also, if you hear a rumbling in the background, they're testing our engine at a different test stand right now. I'm not sure if you can hear it or not.
No, I
Um,
can't.
okay, cool. My stuff on my walls is shaking right now. Um, but yeah,
I
for
actually
sure.
might want to see the floor plan from your house.
Yeah, I'll send it over to you.
Um, if you want to email it to me, I'd just be curious, because like I do feel, although you said you have the second floor, that like you said essentially you'd rather just expand your bedrooms, and I would assume that you probably had most of what you were looking for in the house, but then you were trying to kind of hit that square footage number that you guys needed. So I'd be interested to see what your first floor living area looks like, because I mean, I work in so many older houses, and like building a single floor house was not very common. So
Right.
wrapping my head around like how you do that right is a difficult concept for me.
Yeah, I'll send it over to you for sure, and hopefully you can get some ideas from it. Yeah, we ended up our house looks pretty massive when you pull up to it, just
Yeah.
because it's long, basically looking from left to right, looking at the front of the house, because you got the 2-car garage on this side, and then it goes all the way across. You got master bedroom, kitchen, and then big living room, and then the kids' rooms are further on the other end of the house. So it looks like a huge house, but if you look at it from the end, it's not nearly as deep as you would imagine it is.
Yeah.
Um, so, and that we sort of did that to fit our property as well. And so that was another thing, having the design build firm for was super helpful, is making sure that we were going to build a house that fit the property, fit the area, something that doesn't stick out like a sore thumb and just look completely out of place, which
Yeah.
seems to be a problem in a lot of areas.
Yeah. Where it's like I designed a house and then I'm going to find the property that I can just like plop it on.
Right.
Especially when you have a fair amount of property, because you're not limited to any constraints, and it can look very out of place just as much as like a house that's too big for a small property. So,
Right. Right. For sure.
um, is there anything like, what's one or two things that you would say that you did throughout your build that you were just like, I'm so glad that we did this? And anyone who builds, I would recommend doing the same thing.
So going into it before pouring the slab, knowing that you're going to do a curbless shower,
Yeah.
and I would say go that route. Make sure you have a good foundation crew lined up and good tile folks lined up. You
Yep.
obviously have some pretty good tile folks lined up.
Unfortunately,
Yeah, who can make sure you
I'm
get
not looking forward to that.
yeah. That was one thing I didn't do. I signed up for doing the flooring. We put down engineered hardwood, white oak, and I signed up to do that. And I told him I was not going to do the tile. I did
Yeah,
not want to mess with the tile. And looking back, it was worth saving the money on the flooring install, but that was much more of a chore than I anticipated.
yeah,
That
that sucks.
wore me out for sure. But yeah, so the curbless showers I would do again any day of the week. Um, and then pre-planning for ERVs. Y'all may
Yeah,
use HRVs up there. I'm not sure with your climate
yep,
zone, but pre-planning for ERVs. So we don't have any single-use bathroom fans in any of the bathrooms. We have ERVs. We have 2 ERVs in the house, and they handle all of the bathroom vents. And then also planning for, we have a remote mounted fan for the uh, range exhaust. So
yeah,
the exhaust duct or exhaust hood over the range, the fan for it is mounted in the pantry, sort of a wall behind, so that it quiets it down a lot. And then we have the
that's
makeup
cool.
air system also plumb into the hood, giving us sort of a curtain around the perimeter of the hood. And I saw that in one of Nick's videos. They were doing that,
Yeah,
and I was like, I'm gonna do that.
yeah, that's neat.
Um, Yeah, just little things like that to think through, trying to figure out how to make things quieter. Because
Yeah,
in all the houses we've been in, we've had the air handler for the AC just in a closet with a vent right there in the living room, and you knew when it was running all the
yeah.
time.
You have
So
to turn the TV volume up.
right, it's super frustrating, stuff like that, and, like, being in places where you don't even wanna turn on the fan above the stove because it's so loud, you can't talk to anybody in there.
Yeah,
Just trying to eliminate those sorta little aggravations.
I feel like that's our life right now. I mean, living in an old house, it's very quiet. Um, but at the same time, like everything that's old, like it's quiet from a noise perspective. You don't hear much from outside. Like I don't hear people in other rooms, but everything that functions in the house is old. So everything else is noisy. And I'm like finally getting around to replacing a bunch of the like dumb, but our there's a fan in our kitchen, just for like air circulation,
Mhm.
and it was so loud that for 4 years I just wouldn't use it because it was so loud, and I'm like finally replacing it with a modern fan where it's like, "Oh, we can have the fan on the kitchen while we're hanging out in here with the windows open, and it's not like like it was so loud I felt badly leaving it on when the dogs were in the kitchen,
Oh,
even when
yeah.
we weren't home, because I'm like, that's gonna drive them nuts.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, we're definitely excited to get started. Anxious to get started, scared to get started, but I'm at the point now where it's like we have to make this happen.
Right.
Figure out however we're going to. I know that you told me a while ago when all of this happened, when we were like on the fence about buying the property and actually doing it. And I think that you're the first person to tell me that you're buying the land, you're buying the house, and you're marrying the rate.
Yep.
Which like I still remember that, and that's still extremely relevant, maybe
Well,
even more than 2 years ago.
yeah, you marry the land, date the rate.
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely still relevant now. So I'm holding on to that.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you, hopefully. I don't know what needs to take place to get rates to
Yeah,
go back down. I don't know if I want to go through what has to take place to get rates to go back down, but it would be
yeah,
great if they came back down.
yeah. I'm unsure as well, but it's just one of those things where I'm like, everyone's dealing with the same shit. There's two options: you either stay put and like basically trapped in that life, or you make something happen. So it's
Right.
like, do you want to be trapped, or do you want to just say screw it, make something happen? Everyone's dealing with this. So I'm at the point now where I'm like, let's just make something happen.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I always go back to is one of my track coaches in college. He basically his coaching philosophy was you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's the only way
Hmm.
you progress, only way you get better. And I mean that sort of spans all facets of life, not just athletics or anything, but it is the same sort of thing. Like it's very uncomfortable. This is the biggest amount of debt we've ever been in. It's the biggest financial investment we've ever made, and it's uncomfortable. Like
Yeah.
no two ways about it. But I think looking to the future, it's going to be a benefit to us, and we're in a much better position now than we were in our previous home. So I
Yeah. And
think it's
like,
worth it.
I even know the life that my kids have and will continue to have based on what we're doing. And like, in your situation, this is the life, especially with everything that's going on in today's day and age, that you want to create for your children.
Right.
At least in my opinion, that's like what I would have dreamt for as a child, and it gets them outside, and it gets them off the couch, and it keeps them out of trouble, and it keeps you engaged with them, and it's a very short time in our life that we have them around. And I think that this does create, at least in my opinion, the best type of lifestyle that I want for my family, even if we're having to sacrifice in other areas.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's just the peace of mind of being able to have being in an area where your kids can just go run free in the yard, go in the woods, go find snakes and
Yeah,
stuff like that, as
scare my
opposed,
wife with them.
yeah. But compared to the alternatives that we were in, and a lot of other people are in day to day, and just we just went on a little trip to the Woodlands, Texas. I don't know if you're familiar with that area. It's a little
Mm-mm.
north of Houston, and it's a well-off area. Definitely out of our tax bracket, but definitely not somewhere I would want to live. Just the sort of condos and subdivisions and all that sort of stuff is just not the life I would want to live, not the life I'd want my kids to have. So I think we're
Yeah, absolutely.
very lucky we live in a place where we can have 15 acres of land just for us to
Yeah,
get into
yeah,
trouble on.
and it's definitely no right or wrong. It's just like about creating a life that works for you and your family. So that being said, I have a podcast at 3, but
Okay.
quickly, where can people find who you are? I know that you have your South Coast fabrication YouTube channel, your Instagram, anything that's relevant for Brio, and where to find him.
Yeah, like you said, South Coast Fabrication and Outdoors on YouTube. If you want to follow me along as I cut grass and see what works
Cut
and what
trail.
doesn't, cut trails. Yeah, go bush hogging with a zero turn. stuff like that. And then South Coast Dad on Instagram is where I do most of my stuff. I started making a YouTube channel following the house build and Instagram for that, but we got through insulation and I couldn't keep doing it. I lost the fire for it. It is a lot. So there's some stuff out there. If you go look at South Coast Home on YouTube, and I think the same thing on Instagram, South Coast Home, you'll see some stuff. I need to go back and just post some finished pictures and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, that's pretty much
awesome. Well, I appreciate your time as always. Good catching up. I can't believe it's been 2 years. I know that we keep in touch offline. I had on my PF flyers for the girls.
Nice.
All their softball this year. That's like my go-to softball shoe now. I'm like, this is perfectly appropriate for it.
That's awesome.
And people are just the girls were asking about it. I was like, I can't believe you're asking me about these right now. I was like, you can't be playing softball or baseball right now and not know this. So yeah.
Did you sit them down and watch the movie?
Dude, they need to. I was like, and they're like, we've seen it. We just don't remember that. I was like, well, then you need to go watch it again.
That's the best part.
I know. But yeah, so thanks for that as well.
For sure.
I definitely appreciate your time.
All right, appreciate it. We'll talk to you later.
Soon. Yep, thanks for the help.
Yep,
see you
later.